So we'll now move on to our next session, which is styled as a fireside chat, unlocking the benefits of sustainable sourcing. Please bear with us while we get the stage ready for the next session. Please remain seated. This is not a break. We quickly move on to our next session, which is styled as a fireside chat, unlocking the benefits of sustainable sourcing. May I warmly welcome on stage Mr. Shivakumar, who is the host for this session. May I request him to please take his seat on the dais. A warm welcome to Mr. Nishant Gupta, Head of Sustainability Flipkart. A warm welcome to Mr. Jasmeer Dhingra, Director Programs IDH India. And we warmly welcome Ms. Deepanvita Chakrabarti, Social and Environmental Responsibility Strategist. So, a warm welcome to all of our esteemed panelists. And with that, I hand it over to you, Mr. Shivkumar, to take the session forward and carry off this discussion.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Rules of the game. Can you give a big round of applause to yourself first? And if you want to applaud, this is the volume I want to hear, okay? Not a very soft one. Thank you, fellow Fireside. Metaphorical fire is here, so that's what the Fireside. Or we will create the fire by some of our points. Just to kickstart our discussion, this is about sustainable sourcing, a subject very close to my heart, and to many of you, that's why you turned up. One of the things a global survey has shown is that 93% of consumers demand that their brands source sustainably. And that's not a small number, right? So this has become a business imperative, not just compliance driven. Secondly, those of the companies which have invested, and some of them are here, 20% is the average uptick of revenue and cost reduction. This is over, and I was talking to Jasmeer about this is over medium to long term, right? It's not an easy pathway either. And the third is if we were to just take the regenerative practices, it can add to $4.5 trillion to the economy, job creation, many, many other things. So I think sustainable sourcing is no more a compliance-driven approach alone, but it's also about making business sense and also planet sense, right? With that, I'm going to kickstart the discussion with Jasmeer first. I hope the mic works. And before I roll the question, I'm going to put one question to the audience. I suddenly remembered. I know Vijay just now mentioned about cards. We all use visiting cards, right? So how many of you use LinkedIn QR code to link up each other in this conference? Any of you here?
I use LinkedIn.
Yeah. All the three of my panelists. I think we made it one of the conditions for you to be here, right? So it's really easy. I'll just give you quick steps. Go to your LinkedIn. There's a search button on the top. There is a search bar where you search for people. Click on that. It's very non-intuitive. And you can click on it, and then you will find a QR code. And that's your QR code. You can show it to people. And they don't need to go into their LinkedIn. They can use their camera, just show it, and then it will take it to their LinkedIn. And those of you who don't use social media, my apologies, but for those who use LinkedIn, this is a very useful way rather than exchange cards, right? Jasmeer, over to you. What would be a great introduction is what do you do, and a bit about yourself and the work that you do in IDH relating to sustainable sourcing.
Great. Okay, thanks, Shiv. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Jasmeer, and I'm Director Programs at IDH. And maybe just to simplify what we do, the space we occupy, I would think of us as a ecosystem enabler, right? Because we're not a single company, but what we do is work with groups of companies in a sector or what we call in a landscape, which is basically a place. And we work together on identifying what are the sustainability challenges that are common to these stakeholders in a sector. How do we solve them together? We call this pre-competitive collaboration, right? Things that come in before you start talking about trade and pricing and so on. In a crux, that's what we do. And at IDH, we normally tend to play the role of the convener in these partnerships, right? Because you need somebody neutral on the table who can decode everyone's language, try and uncover what is common or uncommon in these areas. In terms of sustainable sourcing, I think what we do is two parts. One is bring the group together to work on a shared agenda. The second part is also in that process, work with different companies to help them see what are the different sustainable sourcing strategies they can take. Yeah. And I guess more on that later.
Oh, great. And a bit about yourself.
What would you like to know? So I have been with IDH. There's so much to unpack here, right? But at least from a professional standpoint, I've been with the organization for 11 years. A lot of, I think, what shaped me in these 11 years is seeing where the conversation started. I was motivated to join the sector because I was trying to find my place in how to help business do better. It was a very simple, aspirational, dream-like motivation back then. Since then, I think the sector, the world, so much has come so far, and I'm still in it. So maybe that's a good thing to know about me. I'm maybe as persistent as the sector and still dreaming. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Can you give a round of applause, please? Nishant, next over to you. A brief introduction about you and the work that you do.
Yeah. So hi everyone. I'm Nishant Gupta. I am from Delhi and I have been with the Flipkart group for a little over 13 and a half years. So I joined the organization back in 2011 when everybody around me really thought it was a huge risk that I was taking in my career, going for an industry that I had to literally explain a few times before anybody would get it. Uh, and here I am about 13 and a half, 14 years later, having ridden the rocket ship ride that Flipkart has been. Uh, Currently, I'm leading Flipkart Group's sustainability charter, which means responsible for all the decarbonization efforts that we have, also contributing to the ESG charter in multiple aspects. But for the first 10 years at Flipkart, I was leading businesses, setting up categories, set up the marketplace function for third party sellers, help them grow. And one of the common theme that I think has been there across the board has been the sense of responsibility, this sense of what Flipkart or e-commerce could do for the country and for the communities that we work with, right? So the fact that we don't exist in isolation, we work with the communities, we work for the communities, and we have to be in a symbiotic relationship with the community. So that thought process essentially has driven the work across all these years, be it marketplace platform where we were onboarding millions of sellers to be able to make their products available to the consumers, or now where we are leading the decarbonization efforts of transition to renewable energy, or launching initiatives like Flipkart Samarth, which is around enabling market access for underserved communities. So I think that's been pretty much the most common factor across the work that we have taken up. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Could you just help define the word communities in your context? What does it mean?
So communities would pretty much include everyone, right? So right from the immediate. So if I were to use somebody else's framework, which I heard very recently, was that at the core is your own organization, which is you, your operations, your employees. Then comes the ecosystem or the partners that you're working with, your vendors, your brands, your suppliers, etc. And then you have the consumers, who, which is then in the third concentric circle, who you are serving essentially. And then is the final, the fourth one, which is the larger community, which includes pretty much everyone in the country, right? When you set up a warehouse in a geography, it's not just the employment that is being created there, but it also impacts the topography of that place, right? A lot of newer ecosystem gets developed. There are a lot of ecosystem industries that get developed. Like in automotive, you have a plant coming up, and then you have an ancillary unit that comes up right next door, right? So all of that forms the community, the families of the people that work either directly with us or indirectly through our vendors and their families and their extended families. So pretty much it's, as I mentioned, it just becomes everybody in the country.
So it's more like a concentric circles of communities that
Yes.
you address. Okay, wonderful. Uh, you were recently recognized by your company on something, and I want you to talk about that a little bit.
Are you talking about ASOCHAM thing?
Talk about that too.
uh, so I also lead the DNI efforts at Flipkart. What we have done in the last couple of years is established a very strong community within Flipkart centered on the LGBTQ plus community at Flipkart. And there, the approach that we have taken is a lot more holistic one to not just create policies and frameworks for the employees that we have in the organization, supporting them in whatever format, ensuring that at least the first element was that we uh, set the benchmark for the policies, right? So the policies have to be supportive. That's the first thing. Second thing is sensitizing all the employees around what are the needs, what are the aspirations, what are the to do things, what are the just the no go zones, uh, and helping educate uh, the larger organization, not just uh, the community that themselves, but the onus of education should not be on the community for the others, right? The others should be able to figure out and educate themselves. That is the second thing that we did. Then we started expanding our approach to outside Flipkart. So Flipkart Foundation gave a grant to an organization that supports people from the transgender community upskilling themselves, finding better job opportunities. Then we also said that what about our consumers, right? So we started onboarding selection that is relevant for the LGBTQ community. So we did all of this, and so that's the work that I have also been leading, and I'm myself from the community. So it's a relatively easier thing to do because you understand what you have gone through and what you want to do for the community or what the community needs. That was something that we recently
Let's
completed.
give a round of applause to, and a strong one, please. Thank you. Dipanvita, your introduction, the work that you do in Kargil and beyond.
Thank you, Shiv. And good morning, everyone. And Shiv, thank you. And great to be with Jasmeer and Nishant here. Well, I'm actually at a very interesting phase in my career right now. Spent a little over 17 years at Cargill and been leading the corporate responsibility sustainable development practice area for the company. And I find myself at a space where I'm kind of rethinking, realigning, resetting, and rebooting, taking all of the experiences and learnings from the work that we have done so far and trying to look ahead. So that's just a bit of an update here. But I have to talk about a lot of the work that has been set at an organization like Cargill, where most of my career span in the company has been about catalyzing, enabling, and empowering change, working through with the business side of the organization, but also with the development side of it to bring and bridge it together to create meaningful conversations and compelling stories, if I may just sum it up that way. It entails just the organization because it is a food, ag, logistics, just everything encompassing, and the complex network of commodities, farming ecosystem, commercial organization that we have dealt with. It has been a very interesting conversation and also bring in convergence with organizations and partners who actually enable and work towards creating those practices and changes. Just to probably give a few examples, when we look at a few value chains, for example, corn or soybean, cocoa, all of these are complex ones. And I had the privilege of also working across the Asia Pacific region, about 9 countries which fell in my remit. And just having conversations with governments linking regulatory aspects to linking how the SDGs are connecting to creating impact matrices, to connecting it back to customers and what matters to them, as well as bringing in partners like IDH and many others to be on a journey on regenerative practices, sustainable sourcing, creating conversations where women in those farming ecosystems and in the entire value chain can not only find avenues for livelihoods but also have that agency, which is just, I think that has been one of the most phenomenal inspiration that I have seen when you create that little platform for people, and the kind of change that it creates goes a long, long way. And personally, if I have to just share a little bit, I love diving, falling from the skies, and doing all sorts of crazy things like going on treks. One of the examples that was a life changing one for me was to dive with white sharks in Mosel Bay and in South Africa, where one of the scientists kind of, it was fascinating how he treated all those sharks as his children and told us fascinating stories. And when you are inside a cage when you dive, so once that happens with you and when the sharks are coming and attacking at you, you know that you could never see another animal in a zoo for your entire life. So yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Thank you. Give a big round of applause. I'm really tempted to ask the question: do you need to be so risque to work in sustainable sourcing? No.
Perhaps.
Perhaps. Okay. So no, I was also fascinated by one of your LinkedIn posts where I think you took a bunch of retired women teachers. Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that? I was really touched by that story. What you had written there.
Well, all of us, if we look back in our time and career, in our families, all of us found some examples or some stories which pushed us ahead to be or do more than ourselves. So for me, it was right at the beginning of my career. I was just interning with a company called Cox and Kings. I think everybody is familiar with that. And the then chairman I was just an intern, right? And she just tasked me with taking care of a group of women teachers who had just retired and were going to embark on their first Europe trip. That was about 20 years back. And you would think it's just logistics that a travel consultant does and all of that, right? But it was not that. How you fascinatingly become part of their story while they are having conversations or facilitating that. And to cut the long story short, of course, they had their fights, and I was part of all of that. I was this young girl who was part of all of those conversations. And the most fulfilling part of it was when they came back and wanted to do that again. I think, as we talk about, if I had to just bring a linkage to what we do as practitioners, all of us in our workspaces, right? And we call ourselves sustainability practitioners, development practitioners, what have you. All of those life experiences that we have all had, when we bring it to our work and how it pays out and plans out, I think it just creates fascinating stories for all of us. Thank you.
Absolutely. So those of you wondering what's this connection of these questions to to the Fireside Chat people is also for you to know them personally, so that as we are moving forward on this and connect, probably many of you here are from the same kind of a background and feelings, right? So Dipanwita, since I want to continue with the next question with you. If you meet either an unexposed or unconvinced person on sustainable sourcing, no, this is too expensive. It's okay for big brands to do it. It doesn't work. We tried it. Quality issues, aggregation issues. A number of challenges are there. It's not a beautiful runway, right? So, what is the why you explain to them? Why do you need to go down the route of sustainable sourcing?
Thank you. I think one word for that would be not probably a sentence. we are all very familiar with talking about surviving and thriving, right? Surviving is Darwinism, short term. Thriving is not so. And at the same time, for anybody to thrive, for anything to thrive, it does come with effort. It comes with investments, like I said, and it comes with putting ourselves out there, all of us, right? I mean, think about probably the city that we are in Delhi NCR. Real estate is a big deal, isn't it? Now, it is one thing to build the swanky buildings, and I think most of us also are either working in those or living in those whatsoever, or going into those for some reason or the other. But imagine what it is doing to the sometimes not being conscious of the material being used, the wood being used, the aluminum being, the construction material being used, the labor practices out there, right? Imagine what is it doing to the future. We know the water table of, I know for sure, I live in Gurgaon, how badly it has been impacted. It has been on an all-time downstream. We have seen pollution in our city going absolutely crazy. I mean, all of us face it. So this is not something that just affects corporates or an organization or a government or an individual. It is important. And as we speak about ecosystem, Nishant alluded to it, just Mary alluded to it. We are all ecosystem players, and therefore we are all part of it. I mean, think also. I mean, if I have to bring a very simplistic analogy here, right? A vegetable garden. A lot of us love doing that. Now, if you were to, cook a meal with the vegetables from your garden, what would happen if you were to pluck all of it together and then want to store it in your refrigerator? And that won't be the best option to do, right? Rather than, okay, let them grow and then pluck those in time and use it, kind of, so there are just so many nuances to it. There is a Lego nuance for a child. You have to save the bricks of the Lego to, okay, who knows, there must be some other tower that you might want to just so save it, kind of stuff.
Right.
And there comes an innovation, and it's just a plethora of things that comes in, I think. And therefore, and cost is just one of them. But I think it's just not, can't be the only consideration, because one has to think long term. We are all part of it. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank
Also,
you.
the cost versus investment, right? I'm going to just take a quick poll for all of you to know. How many of you are NGOs or civil society here? If you can just raise your hands. Self-identified, okay, quite a lot. Private sector, from companies, corporates, CSRs. Okay, government, state, central, Gram Panchayat. Great. Academic institutions. Okay, social enterprises. Ma'am, you can put up your hand fully. Social enterprises, okay. Just flagging this out so that the large number of the audience are from the civil society. So I want to go back to later on for a question on what does civil society do in the sustainable sourcing? What's the role of them? I'll park that for now, but I want to continue on the discussion, Jasmeer, with you. For the unexposed or unconvinced, what's the why explanation you give?
Sure. And maybe now that we know the breakup, I can try and relate. Yeah. So I agree a lot with what Dipinita said about understanding both the short term and the long term, right? And I think for anyone who's just starting out, the leadership is really important. So without having the commitment at the top, in whatever form of board or management you have, it's very difficult to kick off any effort. So for the unconvinced, I think first thing is, what is going to convince the leadership? Is it a view on your risks that you don't know? Is it a view on, is my business model or my products innovative enough? Like, how do I work towards securing a market or growing my customer base? Depends on the nature of your business, how big or small it is. I think it's important to identify what is going to make you take that leap of faith. But I think when it comes to that, the commitment is often a decision of it being a strategic decision or an investment from your perspective, right? As any company, any organization, you do decide to make some strategic investments. You do it sometimes in your people because you want to hire good talent. You do it sometimes in marketing because you think you need to inform your customers about the kind of products you're generating. It's a similar decision to say that, yes, I also want to invest a little bit to understanding where my materials come from. I want to invest a little bit to help my suppliers, sort of become more responsible. It needs to start with my policies. So I need to invest in our own policies as a business, which send the right signals in terms of whom we want to partner with, what kind of products we want to create, what is the message we want to give our customers. So, I mean, I want to park that message that it really starts with the leadership, and to convince the leadership, it really depends on the stage and nature of your business. You can be opportunistic and take a short term view to begin with, but what's important is to begin.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. Nishan?
Uh, so few things, right? So I'll try to organize my thoughts a little better. But one is that one size doesn't fit all, right? So it has always helped me personally to prep up a little before any such meeting, to figure out who's the naysayer and who needs what's the background, what are the motives, what are the goals of that particular leader or that particular team. Uh, and then customize your communication, right? And I've been like people make fun of me because I have gone from pitching business cases to pitching for their children's future in a meeting, right? So you need to be able to figure out who you're talking to and what is the drive or the motivation of that individual and at that team, right? Another reinforcing factor about the same approach is the fact that everybody, like sustainability teams in any organization, are always going to be lean, right? They're always going to be 2 or 3 people, maximum 10 people. Even if it is a 10,000 employee organization, it is not going to be more than 10, 20 people, right? So you cannot do everything yourself, right? uh, it's just impossible. So what you have to do is to make sure that all the respective teams understand how can their work become more sustainable, how can their day job become more sustainable, right? And for them to incorporate this aspect of sustainable sourcing or sustainable or decarbonized uh, sourcing or any activity, they need to be able to figure out how does it fit into their strategy, right? How does it help in their core job? Because you are being paid your salary for being the sustainability champion. They are not, right? They are being judged. Their KRAs are being about how much margin are they able to save, how much revenue are they able to increase, how much efficiency are they able to bring into their operations, right? So you have to talk in the language that they understand, that the aspects of your work that can help their work better, right? uh, and thankfully we live in a time where uh, more often than not, sustainable sourcing, etc., doesn't come at an extra cost. It does come at an extra effort, but that effort is usually not financial anymore. So
Right.
if you can just play on that aspect to say that it doesn't impact your PNL, it doesn't impact your bottom line, and you'll still be able to move towards better business practices,
Right.
uh, everybody laps it up, right?
Right.
And of course, double clicking on the business impact, right? Like I think the consumers today are being very conscious, as you also rightly said. We have also done our surveys with our consumers, and unsurprisingly, sustainability or sustainable sourcing or ethical sourcing is one of the top three purchase drivers. People are looking for uh, products and services which align with the moral compass of the consumers,
Right.
right?
Right. Absolutely. I think, yes, please.
Yeah, just to Nishant's point, I think the sustainability teams or the practitioners also play a massive role of being educators of the leadership in the organization. And then it, and I just wanted to allude to the proactive and the reactive part of it, right? When there is suddenly a regulation that comes in, and then you just have to run and do it, rather than doing that, kind of, create that platform and bridge. I think the sustainability practitioners, because we have very lean teams, along with civil society partners and NGOs that we work with, it just creates a very important aspect. And this team plays a bridge there to bring this together and create that convergence of business case on both sides of the spectrums. I just wanted to add that point. Thank
No,
you.
it's good to hear that educating leaders in companies is an agenda, because always in civil society we hear that economically poor people have to be educated or awareness has to be built, right? Which is such a top-down patriarchal approach, and it's good to see this. Some education with the leaders is definitely important, and how do you position it, place it? And I just want to give one example, and I want to ask the audience if they have any quick questions or comments to make. Get ready for that. We have the mics here in case you want to line up. We will take no more than 4 very sharp comments or questions. But while we do that, I think we worked with a clothing brand, and one of the things was that they were buying 1 million plastic hangers a year, and these plastic hangers were, the last grade of plastic. You can't do anything else with it. You got to throw it, and they were throwing it away. And what we did is to study the system and then understand that actually this can be reused. What it needed is for somebody to look at it, clean it, quality assure that it still works, and get it back into the stores, right? And we did this for 2 years, sorry, 2.5 years almost, and we managed to save 300 tons of plastic, added to the bottom line of the company, because 300 tons of plastic literally they were not buying anymore, right? And thirdly, we managed to give employment for differently abled women, because we brought those hangers to low income settings where they could process this, right? So I want to go to some opportunities and challenges that we see, because I don't think in today's climate world, I like the point that you said it's not only about surviving, thriving, but it's also about resilience, right? Building resilience in a climate world is going to be very, very important. So I want to go to some of the examples from my panelists to ask what are the things that they see as opportunities and challenges. Any quick questions, comments, or examples from the audience? I think the mics are over here. You may need to transport yourself in the front in case you want to. Or there are mics also here. No? Yes, yes, ma'am.
Hi, I am Ravdeep, and good morning, everyone. My question is to all the panelists. I was with Nestle like 2005, and we started creating shared value. Worked with some other corporates in Bikaner on Guar. We started, traceable and sustainable Guar. My question is that what is the challenge that we are not able to upscale, or let's say scale up these sustainability efforts? I think it's the same question Shiv just asked. Thank you.
No, thank you. No, it's good to hear from all the luminaries who are here with us, not just the dignitaries. Yes, sir.
Um, Good morning, everyone. My name is Vidit. So my question would be precisely to the corporates, like Cargill is here, Flipkart is here. So global commitments are there from all the big companies, like on sustainability in different value chains. But when it comes to India, it's more consumer-centric approach. So probably like the global mandates, and now with EUDR and like other compliances, net zero targets, you have to be compliant, like eventually by 2030 or by 2050 going forward. So if I see like the European market, the way it's moving, or US markets, India is still far behind, like in all these compliances, whether we talk about scope 3 or scope 2 or scope 1 for that matter. So how do you see, like specifically the Panvita, like if you can just talk about the Cargill's agenda in India, talking about leading the sustainability, because when we talk about sustainability, it also involves a lot of investment which needs to go into the, like supply chains. So what's the overall agenda of Cargill in India, and what are the bottlenecks you see to like scale it up? Because I've seen it most of the times. It's a battle between the sustainability lead and the procurement lead, because sustainability leads wants to do it as the part of their job and the mandate, but when it comes to business, you have to run your own business. Like, you have to see the margins, you have to see the price which is going to get raised because of sustainability, whether that is going to meet by the consumers or not. So I mean,
Yeah.
that's the question.
Oh, thank you. I think this is an important schism we need to go back to. The fact that we have sustainability teams in place, right? And the fact that you have to do that nuanced conversation. Hey, there's a business value here, and how do you scale it up? It's not just doing it in boutique senses, right? The hanger example I gave you has not been scaled up by any other brands, right? So, what are the challenges and what are the opportunities? Nishant, if may ask you to start off.
So in terms of challenges, I think, as I mentioned earlier, the cost is no longer that much of a challenge. There are solutions which are either already available or are in stages of evaluation,
Or
which
even cheaper.
yeah, of course. Like for example, electric vehicles, right? So electric vehicles, the cost of ownership is still relatively high, but the cost of operation has gone down considerably low. So if you look at EMI plus cost of operation, which for ICE engine vehicle is the cost of fuel, and for EV it's cost of electricity, right? So if you put EMI plus cost of operating together, the EVs are way cheaper, right? It's just that the first upfront cost is relatively higher, and over a period of time, even that will go down, right? So in the last 5 years, if you have seen EV evolution, the trends are downwards in terms of cost. So as I mentioned, the cost is no longer the challenge. I think the challenge is the non cost related effort that needs to go in, right? Uh, I'll also perhaps give an example of another initiative that we had launched about 5 years ago, which was called Flipkart Samarth. Uh, that is centered essentially around underserved communities like artisans, rural women entrepreneurs, transgender community who might not otherwise have access to markets very easily. And how can e-commerce provide equitable access, market access to them, right? We tried multiple things. We tried giving discounts on commissions to say that we will waive off the commission for a period of time. We did all of those things, and eventually it was actually not the monetary effort that was required. It was a lot more hand holding and enabling and redesigning the solution, right? So what we then realized that was that artisans at 10 years ago were not in a place to actually be able to, sorry, there was some sound that was coming. Okay, yeah. So one was that they were not digitally enabled enough to be selling on e-commerce marketplaces directly, right? Uh, B, discovery was a much bigger question on e-commerce portals. So while you have millions of products, how do you then surface up this particular selection, right? So then we tweaked the program to say that, okay, discounts on shipping etc is not what the community needs. What you need is a hand holding both from the civil society organizations as well as Flipkart, right? So we started onboarding various non-profits, various government entities etc onto the platform to say that you understand the community the best, right? You know how their products are, you know what will drive them to deliver these results, and we will tell you, you become the bridges between us and the
Customer.
end communities, right? And that sort of redesign was very, very crucial for that to happen, right? Cataloging is something that most people would not understand. Clicking photographs, writing catalog, etc., and hopefully AI will make it much more easier, but at that time it was not. So then we said that we will do the cataloging, right? We will help you with the cataloging. We have cataloging partners who will go to your location, shoot the products, do everything. And in the last 5 years, we have been able to impact 1.8 million livelihoods because of that, because we changed the approach. Now, this takes time, right? So the biggest challenge that you have to now come to the exact question that you asked, the biggest challenge is lack of patience, right? So how do you then persevere to say that no, this is a problem that must be solved, right? And you need alignment from across the organization, passionate individuals who say that no, I will solve this problem, watch me, right? And then reiterate, because the first few iterations, to be honest, these are difficult problems, are not going to succeed. Don't just look at monetary solutions, look at solutions which require effort, which is non-monetary essentially in most of the cases, and go ahead and do it, right?
Right.
So yeah, I'm not sure if I went on a
No,
long
no,
monologue
no.
and if that did
No,
answer your
what
question,
what
but
I
yeah.
hear you say is about patience. That means these things take effort, but I think embedding within the business processes and how you can actually save, and how some of it is investment, not really cost, right? That flip is really important. I want to park one question with you and then come back to Deepanita on this. Is we all know about greenwashing. I heard a new term called green shifting, which means, I moved to EV, but then the power is still coal fired, not renewable, or the battery disposal is a big problem, right? So I just want to park that because that's a criticism I'm sure Flipkart has heard before. So I'd like to know your answer. But Dipinita, if you would like to answer the question, particularly, there's a question around Cargill in particular.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Couple of things. On the bright side of it, the sustainability practitioners today have a seat on the table within the organization's management practices, which is actually bringing conversations. Sometimes these are elephants in the room, but they are in the fore. Whether or not they're getting solved in that month or in the next 3 months or 6 months is a question of patience, deliberance, perseverance, all of that. But the conversation is on the table. I think that's a very significant shift, and I have seen that in my career myself. Second of all, a lot of these practices, these initiatives are being done in silos by organizations. I think there is a need. There is, of course, a very important conversation that is also happening around bringing convergence. A Cargill or a Flipkart or a Nestle or a PepsiCo doing individual initiatives and creating center of excellence is great. But to your point of how do you scale those, I think that's a sweet spot that we are all trying to still find answers to. We have found some, but not yet all of it. As we look at cost imperatives, as we look at reputation, as we look at how the market is behaving, and also as it relates to India, to your specific point, right? We cannot deny the fact within the ambit of acknowledging, recognizing, and being part of Viksit Bharat, that this is a price sensitive market. And that leads to a lot of impatience as it relates to P&Ls, as it relates to how the ecosystem is behaving, upstream, downstream, all of it. I'll give you an example, if you just allow me 2 more minutes, of regenerative agriculture. Okay, so we have a program in Karnataka, okay, where we have about a few thousands of families involved, about 25,000 acres of land to be brought under regenerative agriculture, etc. It took a while for me to convince people around that, once the carbon is sequestered, once we show that, no-till, mulching, creating the bringing the soil nutrient organic content back by doing intercropping and so on, as all the regenerative practices, we will be able to restore this much water. We will be able to also then lend to farming income and the household income. It took a long time, but then that belief came in because we had examples in other parts of the world. I think that's another advantage of working in organizations which have their footprint across the world, where something that has worked in one part of the world can be replicated by creating a locally contextual, relevant space and all of that. So I think all of us are work in progress, including organizations, individuals, civil societies, and the communities. And it's a great time to learn and do this together. There are percentages, there are cost imperatives, there are investment opportunities, and I don't know if there is any impact fund sitting here in the room or not, but we know it for sure that there are people sitting out there trying to find opportunities to do that, to seed those so that that become a business as usual going forward. And I think there is an intention and a very strong willingness in the organization's leadership to go and move forward in that direction, while navigating all the complexities, all the geopolitical environment that everybody is navigating today. Thank you.
I've got to say this at the risk of sounding a little silly, but you guys sound like performance coaches. Because you're saying I have to convince, I have to persevere, I have to do this. I'm going to move this to Jasmeer in terms of asking you, companies which do great work like this, do they work with each other? And how do we create an atmosphere where if you're talking about an ecosystem, these examples alone are not enough, right? Do they work with each other? Because IDH does this work extremely well. Over to you.
Great. I think, in fact, that is how I wanted to approach Ravdeep's question, right? So, when you look at both scale, I think sometimes when we say the word innovation, we expect it to be drastic and rapid innovation, some magic bullet that happens overnight, you shift from manual to tech or something like that, right? But sometimes innovation also means incremental innovation that happens at the right moments. And if I want to just share one example of how something got to scale, there were two things that were important. One is, yes, collaboration of partners, let's say starting within a sector, because that allowed for people to pool their resources. If I use Better Cotton as an example, a partnership that we've been affiliated with for I think about 15 years now. It started out with a group of 4 brands who took a leap of faith, set some sustainability targets they had no idea of how to achieve. Eventually, the first minute innovation for them was grant pooling some funds to say, if I can't do this alone, because I can't work with, if I put my funds, I will reach 100 farmers. But if we pool our funds, potentially with some economies of scale, we can pool our resources to map our supply chains. We're probably sourcing from the same areas. We could reach, 1,000 or 2,000. Eventually, that group of brands became from 4 to 8 to 10. Today, it's 90. But different things have happened between those 4 brands and 90 brands coming together.
Right.
Grant pooling was one innovation in the early days. It created supply. With that supply, there was then attraction of more brands to say, okay, there is sustainable cotton on the table. How do I join this collaborative, right? How can I benefit from it? But that also brought more funds to the collaborative. They were eventually able to move away from a grant fund to a market driven mechanism, saying that there's now enough supply. So instead of expecting brands to put funding as grants, rather let them pay a per volume
And
metric ton fee.
and create the market.
It became a market driven fund, right? Became a procurement driven fund. That was the innovation there. At some point, to scale the supply, in early days it was a strategic decision to shift to mass balance, but today, because there's enough supply, they're able to shift back to physical. These were all strategic, innovative decisions that were taken at the time, and it would not have been possible without the collaboration of multiple actors coming together. But having said that, Shiv, this is one way in which, let's say, apparel companies who wanted to come together, work together as a sector, because they all had a similar goal, target, sustainable cotton, raw material, etc. These were mechanisms that they chose. The other way to look at it is the depth of the impact, right? If you go beyond my target being sustainable cotton, to I want to improve farmer incomes, I want to change soil conditions. That is something we do in a landscape partnership, which requires us to partner with other actors. That's where we work with the government and the private sector. Right? The private sector does innovative, smartly designed, business case driven, lots of data projects, but they are islands of progress till you can actually show those proof of concepts to the government and say, how can you channelize more incentives to scale this? How can we build capacity of your systems which are there, even if they have gaps? How can we strengthen those? Because you have the largest boots on the ground. And lastly, I think most crucial is, if you're building these things on the ground, the role of the organizations on the ground, the ones who are closest to the farmers,
Communities.
have to be involved. That is where I think, Dipinita, you were talking about contextualization. it's also where the potential of creating new opportunities, right? We talk about regen ag. Regen ag is not possible unless you really scale up bio input production. And you have people, farmers, communities, self help groups, women on the ground who understand agriculture. So, why can't we take the jobs of creating more bio inputs at scale closer to the ground? Right? Those are the kind of innovations that need to take place if scale needs to be driven, and it needs to come together. These are different pieces. Yeah.
Right. So innovation is not a flashy item alone. It can be small but important. But I also what you hear you say is systems and systems of systems, bringing them together is extremely important. Deepan, with one of the farmers that I work with in Kanakpura in, near Bangalore, said it so beautifully on the region agri. And when we were talking to him about regenerative agriculture, he said, for years we were giving amrit to the land and giving you food. And you came to us and said, give poison to the land, right? And I can say this in Canada, it's so beautiful the way he said it. And give poison to the land. And then now you're saying you are eating poison and therefore bring back the Amrit, right? We were doing that all the years, right? And now you're telling us to go back, right? And so I think it's important for us to bring the community and the people who work with the communities very, very closely into this partnership. I just want to read out something when just when you were talking. Paul Harkin's definition of sustainability, which I thought was so beautiful. Sustainability is about stabilizing the currently disruptive relationship between Earth's two most complex systems. One is the human culture, and the second is the living world. He didn't talk about business. He said the human culture, because our consumption is also culture, right? Our production is a type of culture. And why should sustainability be an afterthought? How is that embedded? When will you all lose your jobs, right? And the main businesses are going to say, you're like a management consultant like Shiv, you're telling me the most obvious, right? So I think that's a world we need to move towards. Any questions, comments from the audience, please? Anything that you want to offer? Yes, please. Please, if you don't mind using the mic.
Hello, my name is Maitreyi. I'm from Anudeep Foundation. Just taking your conversation forward, what is the requirement of skills in your sector? How do we work with youth, we work with children, so, and we want to run programs where we encourage green skilling among children, so, and youth. So, as we've read on ESG, that ultimately everybody will become ESG, and you won't need a separate department for that. So, what would be the requirements to reach there? Thank you.
Excellent. At least we have a young person's voice in terms of asking what do we need as skill sets. Very, very quickly. Any of you?
Maybe I can just take that very quickly. And I have to say I empathize with this. I understand this question because I don't come from this world, right? I haven't been trained in sustainability. I graduated as a literature student. I think my biggest high point was when a KVK scientist once asked me if I'm an epidemiologist. That only happened because of the many months I spent in the field. And it really taught us, what we need to about our field. If I was to fast track that, I think some skills are, if I think again, what got me here, and therefore how can I suggest this to others? I think there is no replacement for exposure, and you can get that firstly in multiple ways, right? If you're a young professional, the exposure can come from being critical in what you're seeing at a grassroots interning there, versus even interning with companies and really questioning what are they measuring, what is important to them, reading their websites to understand what are the goals they've committed to, etc. But you can fast track the curve now by also looking at what are the trends that are shaping the world. There are voluntary commitments at on one side, which private sector is making. So how can you learn about how companies set goals at a area, at a board level? How are those trickle down by way of trainings to different departments? The second part is also looking at policy shifts, because we've gone through this curve where we've seen a lot of voluntary commitments because the policy environment wasn't pushing or robust enough. And today we've come a little bit back to the point where there is regulation that is coming down. And that is often guiding a lot of the companies to either jumpstart or kick into high gear their sustainability plans. So, what is the EU saying? What is India saying? What is in policy? I think it's important to understand that because you can use those as levers
Right.
in guiding companies along.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'll just quickly add to what she mentioned. Two things. One is that there are two kinds of sustainability jobs, right? Which require functional knowledge. For example, GHG computation, any sort of ESG reporting, all of that does require functional expertise, right? So that's one industry which is coming up very up and fast to say that how do you measure emissions, right? How do you convert your day-to-day operations into carbon dioxide tonnage, right? So that is one thing. But the other thing is mostly about what we've been discussing is that uh, in your own job you have to be mindful of how can you do it more sustainability, right? So if you want to go into marketing, but be conscious of who you are speaking to, what product are you marketing, is there an element of sustainability or responsible sourcing in that product that you would want to bank upon, right? So as I mentioned, one is hardcore functional expertise related fields, right? Like for example, if you want to get into renewable energy, that's a part of power sector, right? If you want to get into EVs, that's part of automotive sector. So one is hardcore functional expertise, and the other one is in whichever industry, in whichever function domain that you want to get into. uh, Fortunately our times are such that you have enough opportunity in every industry, in every function, to do your job a lot more responsibly, and that is a great career in itself. And I think if you allow us some immodesty, our careers are future proof, because you know every job is going to be a climate job, and that's one thing that's been repeatedly said.
Damn, I thought I'm going to make your jobs completely redundant, but you're saying climate proofed. Yes.
I just add a couple of things. Curiosity. There is no replacement for curiosity. And the other is from a consumer standpoint, read the labels. What you wear, what you eat, what you consume. Please read the labels.
And ask the right questions along with it. Right. Before we close, I heard recently in a summit, Amazon summit, Dia Mirza. The name will bring an actress in front of you. She's also an environmental activist. So Dia Mirza made a very interesting point. And she didn't do it this way, but I'm going to ask you to do it. If you can close your eyes, all of you, close your eyes for 30 seconds. And I'm going to say something, just think about it. We are the only species among the millions of species in this world who actually has to pay for food and pay for many things that we need to live in. No other species does it. Just reflect on that. Right? Thank you so much. I'm going to end by thanking Access team for putting together a very gender balanced team. And I'm so proud to have Nishant, who also fights for LGBTQ rights within his organization and outside, to be part of the team. And I enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you did too. And thank you very much. Let's give a round of applause to all the three of them.
Thank you for giving us a very engaging discussion. Thanks to all the esteemed panelists, our moderator. We would like to present a small token to all of you as appreciation and thanks.